caution, out of fear. It's not just a question of what's it going to do to us, but what are we going to get from it? And I actually think when you ask the question about patience and resolve, one of the real questions is going to be, when you add up all the costs of this, human and financial and logistical and burdensome, I don't know how you calculate it. I don't know how you do that. It's way more than money, and it's even more, it's, believe it or not, than 5,000 lives. The ripple effect of this, I think, is going to ultimately wind up affecting millions of people.
Is this a doable thing we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. But if I may just for a moment, for almost myself, since it's happened, commenting, worldwide and answering questions, it's had a traumatic shock on my body. But hearing the discussion when you opened up, Jack, mentioning what events, in your past, in lifetime, were monumental, and each one mentioned certainly the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And but you're in the business to look at the news and to pick out and report to the general public. But somebody like myself, who spent his entire life almost studying just this day, this possibility, and then to see it happen, it's my greatest fears were visited. And so unfortunately, I don't wish this upon America, but we are coming into an age where each one of you and everybody out there is going to have to think about it and give the thought that I have over 35 years in this business of studying the terrorist mindset and seeing what happened on the 11th. And that's the type of effort that's going to have to be launched in these United States. I consider myself a sane person. I consider myself able to focus in on what I love in the United States, our Constitution and our freedom of access, but yet my life is spent looking at just this possibility, and I think I'm traumatized by it, but I think if we all put our effort to it, sort of a Marshall Plan or a monumental approach to taking a look at what's going to happen, then we're going to solve it. If we're going to take the approach that was hinted before, this singular effort, this one-shot deal, firing some missiles in and then walking away from it, it's going to be over with, because the front is not just going to be outside the United States, gentlemen, but the front will be inside the United States. We're going to have a fifth column of subversive acts occurring here.
Like Jerusalem with the car bombings and the...
Absolutely, that's the
daily
that's
occurrence. The
next stage. I mean, Jeff mentioned it. Osama bin Laden himself has never considered the same thing twice. It's always ratcheted up. So the next thing might be somebody in Penn Station with 40 pounds of explosives pressing that button. Because make no mistake about it, you can't pull off a monumental effort like this unless you have support. Osama's not sitting in the Batcave in Afghanistan on his cell phone saying, you do this, you do that. Yep. His adherents are out here with a message beyond what he's already told them.
All right, we're going to get to Dave in California who's on the phone. Jeff, I know you've got a long day, and you've got Greenfield at large to look over, and you've got demands placed on you by other CNN programs. I thank you for helping us launch this, and I look forward to talking to you again on this program soon. Jeff Greenfield. Dave, in California, what can we do for you?
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I actually had two questions. One is first about the military response, and then if I can, a second one about immigration. But I'm a 32.
Let's start with the military response question.
Okay, military response question. I'm a 32-year-old father of two here in California. My grandfathers fought in World War II. In fact, one was a B-17 pilot in Europe. You folks have mentioned the question about, do we have the intestinal fortitude for this? But yesterday I saw an interview with Norman Schwarzkopf about, and this question has been raised about ground troops. And I think the American people need to prepare themselves for the question of that this is going to take years. But here's my question. I've only heard phrases on the news of, well, U.S. hasn't ruled out any options. I'd like to hear from the experts if they think that if this does drag out years, would we consider, you've shown pictures in the last 10 minutes, bin Laden is literally and figuratively maybe under a rock. And would we consider the use of tactical battlefield nuclear weapons to end this in lieu of losing 50,000 United States and coalition and British and French and German forces? Because we better start talking about it now, because the question might arise 2 or 3 years from now. That's my question.
Well, it's a good question I'm not capable of answering. I suppose the question on top of the question is whether even in the case of someone who has dug into the degree that he apparently is, whether even tactical nuclear weapons would be effective. I mean, there is a school of thought that says the only way you get this guy is to go in and dig him out, get him out by hand. The other part of the story is the reading I've done, he's surrounded with people who are instructed to make him a martyr rather than allow him to be taken alive, so that in the event that the security around him is penetrated, his people have instructions to put a bullet in his head so that he becomes a martyr for the Islamic fundamentalists. But what about the question of nuclear weapons? And while we're on the subject, a country very much involved in this is Pakistan, and they have nuclear weapons.
Well, certainly at this stage, nothing's off the table. I mean, if you take the president literally smoking them out of their holes, that's what you would do with, you know, with nuclear weapons. But there are geopolitical considerations that need to be discussed. First of all, you have the concept of Iran is in the area, and certainly Pakistan, and realize that when you launch a nuclear attack, you launch it against the world, you launch it against the atmosphere, and I don't know whether or not American citizens, certainly environmentalists, you don't want to get them up on something like this. So I think it would be serious to use a tactical nuclear weapon. I think there are other ways of dealing with this rather than the ultimate. That seems to me something that these people would think of using. And certainly Osama already thinks of himself as a dead man walking. He knows his life is numbered. So that's not a way to win this type of war.
What was the other question, Dave? You still there? All right, Calvin in Texas.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering, the FBI Most Wanted done so good and everything else, why can't we put their pictures and their faces up on the TV so we will know who they are? To where, like in Florida, they didn't know who they were, but the CIA and FBI were looking for them, but yet, you know, we didn't know.
I'm
Why
not
can't
sure.
we put their picture up on the TV?
Calvin, I'm not sure that the identifications of these, if you're talking about the hijackers, I think those identifications were made after the fact, if the reading I've done is accurate. And prior to the event, we didn't know who they were. We obviously didn't know the event was even going to take place. But within a matter of hours, because apparently they left a trail that was fairly easy to follow, knowing that they were going to die in this thing, they did have IDs, and the names and the pictures were published shortly thereafter. I'm not sure they would have been able to publish the pictures of the people who did the crime before they knew the crime was going to happen, if you get my drift.
And you know, Osama's picture is the most publicized in the world the last couple of years, and there's $5 million on his head, and he's #1 in the world. I don't think that that's going to do any good in this particular instance at all.
All right, why don't we bring our other guest into this, who is a woman who has had some very harsh things to say about the airline industry in this country. Mary Schiavo is a formerly Inspector General of the Department of Transportation. She has written a best-selling book entitled, and I had it written here, where is it? Flying Blind, Flying Safe. She joins us this evening from Columbus, Ohio. Mary, nice to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you got a call that you had to be in California in the next couple of days, would you go to the airport, buy a ticket, and get on a plane tonight to go?
No, I already got that call and said no.
Why?
Well, because we had a rush to get everything, quote, back to normal, and the response has been very piecemeal. And Mr. Greenfield was absolutely right. The trouble is we've rushed to put in these stopgap measures. Many of these things we've done, we've tried before. It's piecemeal. We have the same security screeners that already allowed the breach, the breaches in the past. And this is kind of too little, too late. We're doing the same old thing, and the threat is much greater than that now. One of the things, for example, the FAA had many different terrorist scenarios on the table that they were worried about, and many of those aren't covered by the current security plan. So really, with the piecemeal reaction and the reaction to get things to normal, that's not really the response I want to see, because we are going to have a whole new way of looking at security. And people, I'm old enough to remember, I hope a lot of other Americans are, you know, we didn't used to even have security in airports, and people complained about that. Oh, we have to go through metal detectors now, and oh, now we have to produce IDs, and oh, now we're going to have to answer these two ridiculous questions. We did it, and we all complied with it, and we got used to it, and now we have to build the airports for another threat. And I think that people saying, oh, this is going to destroy the airlines, they aren't really thinking very clearly about what we've been through.
Well, the airlines are well on their way to being destroyed by these events already. They were struggling under the weight of declining revenue, high fuel costs, just inimitable delays that were occurring. I remember particularly earlier in the spring and last winter. I mean, you couldn't get any place either out on time or arrive on time. I mean, the service was just atrocious. A lot of them are in financial trouble already. Now comes the total cost of this thing, the fact that airlines are cutting back. Let me talk to you, though, about security measures. I mean, it was almost as though people tried to keep from laughing out loud when one of the first things we heard after this was we weren't going to have curbside check-in anymore. Is it just me, or is there some absurdity hidden there?
That's right. There's this absurdity hidden there, and particularly, I mean, when people got to thinking about that, they realized that before, basically our terrorist check consisted of the skycaps asking us if we had packed our own bags, and the curbside check doesn't do anything to eliminate the kind of threat that we've just had or the additional threats that the FAA has considered in the past. And then the other thing that just really made us wonder if anyone in the FAA really flew is when they said they're going to ban steak knives off of airline meals. I really, I mean, I couldn't laugh because this is so tragic, but I really wondered who's in charge.
The other thing, as I understand it, airline security, it's sort of been up to the airlines up to this point. Is that true? And it was up to them to pay for it. Now, the other thing that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, not exactly. We have a piecemeal plan. The way it works is the FAA asks each airline to submit their security plan and each airport to submit their security plan, and then the FAA will approve them, and then the airline and the airport then contract out the security function to the lowest bidder. So it's, you know, 1,000 different plans with, you know, 1,000 different ideas how to meet it. And we have, what we have done over the past, though, is pay ticket taxes and facility charges, et cetera, that went into the Aviation Trust Fund, which was supposed to be for aviation safety and security, but we use it for things like, you know, the nice concourses in the airport and the stores and the parking lots.
Also, the quality of the personnel themselves and how carefully they're screened and how much they're paid, and based on the compensation, the kind of individual you can attract to do that kind of work. What ought to be done with who's guarding the airports and the boarding gates now? Who ought to be doing it? How much ought they be paid? Who should do the screening? You know, who should take over the supervision of the airport security system in this country? The FAA doesn't seem to have done a bang-up job here.
Well, you're exactly right, and we are one of the few nations in the world that allow our airport security, which is our national security, to be literally run by a civilian contracting out agency. In most other countries, airport security is considered national security and is either run by federal law enforcement authorities or by the military. And in this case, I think that's really the only long-range viable option we have. Now, I have heard suggestions that the FAA will take back over the security function, but what really is the difference if the FAA contracts out to these low-paid screeners or if the airlines do? I think we need our own national airport security force, and in the meantime, there are ways we could handle that with current forces, but the long run, this is never going to work. It has not worked for 10 years. We had these same warnings and fears after Pan Am 103. We had these same warnings and fears and these same measures during Desert Storm, and people forget that these suggestions have been on the table for years, and we've had very real tragedies before, and we have not changed.
All right. As we move forward, some other things I'd like to talk to you about in the next hour and a half or so, things like cockpit security and why El Al, the Israeli airline, doesn't have these kinds of problems, and what a transponder is, and how come they can be turned off, and other things that I'm sure you won't have a problem with. Let's talk to Barbara in California. She has a question. Barbara?
Yes, I do have a question, but I also have a certain amount of resentment about the idea that only people of faith can join a prayer and remembrance service with President Bush. I am an atheist, and I believe there are many, many patriots who are also atheists. I am a person who believes in reason and the rule of law, and I think that that's what our founding fathers gave us. They didn't give us a religion. They gave us freedom from religion, actually, if we choose it. And I think
that's a fair comment.
I think reason will eventually prevail if we give it a chance, and I believe there's a lot of discussion going on in the government, which is reasonable. So I think we should not become fanatics to fight fanatics.
All right, Barbara, thank you for your comments. Who's next on the telephone? Susan from Indiana, what can we do for you? Or what can you do for us, maybe is a better way to say that. All right. Let me go back to Mary Schiavo. El Al Airlines has the best security in the world. Why?